The driver handed me a package with my son's name on it, and my stomach dropped like a stone. Jacob Sullivan, 1247 Oakwood Drive. Local address, local delivery. For 5 years, my daughter-in-law Rebecca had been telling me Jacob was overseas, a Singapore assignment, too busy building his career to call home, too far away to visit his old man. But this package said different. This package said my son was right here in town, and I'd been lied to for half a decade. I stood there in the farmer's market parking lot, the package trembling in my hands, watching my world reshape itself around one simple truth. If Rebecca lied about where Jacob was, what else had she lied about? My name is Gregory Sullivan, 35 years as a commercial banker, a fraud detection specialist. You'd think that would make me harder to fool. But when it comes to family, even bankers want to believe the best in people. That package was the first crack in Rebecca's perfect story. And once you start pulling on the thread of a lie that big, the whole thing unravels fast. What I discovered over the next 6 weeks wasn't just deception. It was systematic theft, legal manipulation, and a level of betrayal that would make your blood run cold. Rebecca hadn't just been lying about my son's location. She'd been using the courts to imprison him while stealing his inheritance. This is the story of how a misdirected package led me to discover my son was trapped in a nightmare designed by the person he trusted most, and how I used every trick I learned in 3 decades of banking to tear down her house of lies. If you've ever trusted someone completely, if you've ever wondered how far a person will go for money, stay with me, because this story will change how you think about family, trust, and the legal system itself. The ending. Let's just say some packages deliver more than mail. Sometimes they deliver justice. Let me take you back to the beginning, because understanding how I ended up holding that package requires knowing what came before. My name is Gregory Sullivan. Greg to most people. For 35 years, I worked as a commercial banker at First Regional, specializing in fraud detection and compliance. When you've spent 3.5 decades learning to spot lies in loan applications and financial statements, you develop what my wife Martha used to call banker's intuition. Martha, God, I miss her. She died 8 years ago from ovarian cancer, a death that hit Jacob harder than either of us expected. He'd always been sensitive, the kind of boy who cried when other kids stepped on ants. But Martha's death changed him, made him quieter, more withdrawn, more vulnerable. When she passed, she left Jacob $680,000 in a trust fund I'd helped her set up. Life insurance, some investments, the proceeds from selling her mother's house in Portland. Good money. The kind of money that makes people take notice. Rebecca noticed. She showed up in Jacob's life about 6 years ago, right when he was still raw from losing his mother. Pretty woman, mid-30s, worked as a paralegal at Henderson & Associates downtown. Smart as a whip, charming as hell, and she had this way of making Jacob laugh again. For the first time since Martha's funeral, I saw my son smile. I should have been grateful. Instead, something in my banker's gut kept nagging at me. Maybe it was how quickly she moved in. Maybe it was how she always seemed to be the one answering Jacob's phone when I called. Maybe it was the way she'd interrupt our conversations with some urgent need that required Jacob's immediate attention. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that grief makes people protective, that I needed to let my 42-year-old son live his own life. Then came the overseas assignment story. Dad, I've got incredible news, Jacob had said over dinner 5 years ago, Rebecca hanging on his arm like a beautiful anchor. The company is sending me to Singapore. Big project, setting up their Asian operations. Could be gone for a year, maybe 2. What company? I'd asked. Banking habits die hard. Always verify the details. Tech Global Innovations. Rebecca had answered before Jacob could speak. They headhunted him specifically for his project management skills. I nodded and smiled and congratulated my son. But later that night, I'd done what any good banker would do. I looked up Tech Global Innovations, found their website, their corporate filings, even their employee directory. Legitimate company, big contracts in Asia, everything checked out. What I didn't do was verify that Jacob actually worked there. The calls started coming every few weeks, always from Rebecca's phone, always with Jacob in the background sounding tired or stressed or distracted. The time difference is killing him, she'd explained. 16-hour days, constant pressure, but he's doing amazing work. I asked to speak with him directly, of course, but there was always some reason why he couldn't come to the phone right then. Important meeting, conference call with Tokyo, food poisoning from street vendors. The excuses were reasonable, believable, delivered with just enough exasperation to make me feel like a demanding father. So I stopped demanding. For 5 years, I accepted Rebecca's updates, her explanations, her promises that Jacob would call when he could. I sent care packages to the Singapore address she provided, all returned as undeliverable, which she explained as postal service incompetence. I transferred money to Jacob's account when Rebecca said he needed help with living expenses overseas. Transfers that my banker training should have made me question, but my father's heart overruled my professional instincts. 5 years of believing the lie because I wanted to believe it, because it was easier than confronting the possibility that something was wrong, because it let me avoid the messy complications of family conflict. Martha always said, my greatest strength as a banker was my attention to detail, and my greatest weakness as a father was my willingness to avoid confrontation. She was right on both counts, but standing there in the farmer's market that Saturday morning, package at my feet, I felt 35 years of fraud detection training slam back into focus like a camera lens finding its target. I picked up the package with hands that weren't quite steady and walked straight to my car, leaving my Apple shopping unfinished. The return address showed a local medical clinic, West Side Family Practice, 12047 Oakwood Drive, the same address as my son's supposed location. Inside the package were medical bills. $1,200 worth of medical bills addressed to Jacob Sullivan for treatments dating back 4 months. Blood work, x-rays, a psychiatric evaluation, all performed right here in town, while Rebecca was telling me he was negotiating supply chain contracts in Southeast Asia. My banker's brain kicked into overdrive. First rule of fraud investigation: verify the story against the documentation. I called the Singapore number Rebecca had given me years ago for Jacob's company. Disconnected. Had been for over a year, according to the recording. Next, I pulled out my laptop and accessed the bank's internal systems. Still had contacts there, favors I could call in. Within an hour, I had Jacob's account activity for the past 5 years. No international wire transfers, no foreign transaction fees, no evidence of anyone living and working overseas. But there were regular withdrawals. $8,000 every month like clockwork, going back 48 months. Always on the third Friday, always from the same ATM location. I saw him. He's fine, Patricia. Completely competent. They're holding him there under false pretenses. Did he see you? No, I was undercover. But Patricia, we need to move faster. He's asking to call me, and they keep telling him I don't want to talk to him. God knows what he thinks about why I haven't visited. Carl's footage will help. He got video of Jacob's conversations with staff, documentation of him requesting phone privileges and being denied. Between that and your financial evidence, we have a strong case. But Rebecca was getting suspicious. That afternoon, she called me for the first time in months. "Greg, I'm worried about you," she said, her voice carrying a tone of concerned authority I'd never heard before. "Mrs. Chen at Jacob's old apartment building said you were asking strange questions about where he moved, and there was some confusion at his bank about account inquiries. My banking contacts had been more helpful than discreet. I'm just trying to stay connected with my son, Rebecca. It's been 5 years. I understand that. But Jacob's doctors think family contact right now might be destabilizing for him. He's made such progress in his treatment program." Treatment program. The same language Mrs. Hoffman had used. I wondered how much of Rebecca's script came from the facility's own marketing materials. What kind of treatment exactly? Anxiety management, mostly. Some depression counseling. The overseas assignment was really hard on him, Greg. He came back more fragile than we expected. Came back. Past tense. For the first time in 5 years, Rebecca had admitted that Jacob wasn't still overseas. "When did he come back, Rebecca?" Silence. "Then, I should have called you sooner. He's been back for about 6 months, but he needed intensive care. The transition has been difficult." More lies, but now they were desperate lies. The kind people tell when their original story starts falling apart. Jacob had never left the country. He'd been at Riverside for 4 years, not 6 months. I'd like to see him. That's not possible right now. Maybe in a few months when he's more stable. I hung up without saying goodbye. Carl called that evening with news that changed everything. I got footage of Rebecca's last visit, he said. She met with the administrator for 2 hours, reviewed financial documents, and then did something interesting. She coached Jacob on what to say if anyone asked about his living situation. Told him that if doctors or social workers ask questions, he should emphasize how confused and anxious he gets. She even practiced scenarios with him, had him repeat phrases about being grateful for the care and not ready for independence. The video footage was damning. Rebecca wasn't visiting a sick husband. She was managing a performance, making sure Jacob would appear incompetent to anyone who might question his placement. There's more, Carl said. The facility administrator mentioned that Jacob's insurance stopped covering his care 8 months ago. Rebecca's been paying out of pocket since then, out of Jacob's own inheritance. Everything clicked into place. The guardianship had been Rebecca's way to access Jacob's money legally. The care facility was her way to keep him isolated while she spent it. And the lies about overseas assignments were her way to keep me from asking questions. But now I had questions and evidence, and a legal team ready to ask those questions in court. Time to bring Rebecca's house of lies crashing down. Filing the emergency petition felt like lighting a fuse. Within 24 hours, Rebecca's attorney called Patricia with a counter-motion that made my blood run cold. "They're claiming you're the one who's incompetent," Patricia told me over the phone. "Rebecca filed a petition saying you've been showing signs of dementia, that your concerns about Jacob are evidence of paranoid delusions. That's ridiculous. Of course it is, but it's also smart. If she can raise questions about your mental state, it undermines your credibility as a witness against the guardianship." I thought about the conversation I'd had with Rebecca, how she'd seemed genuinely concerned about my strange questions and confusion about Jacob's situation. She'd been setting up this defense for weeks, maybe months. Can she make it stick? Not with the evidence we have, but it shows how far she's willing to go to protect what she's built. What she'd built. That was the phrase that haunted me as I prepared for the coming fight. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Patricia advised me to undergo a full neurological evaluation to preempt Rebecca's claims. I passed with flying colors, but the experience was humiliating. To have my own mental faculties questioned, to be forced to prove my sanity, all because I dared to uncover a lie. It fueled my resolve. The day of the hearing arrived, a crisp autumn morning. The courtroom was packed. Rebecca, dressed impeccably, sat beside her attorney, a picture of calm confidence. She avoided my gaze. Jacob was brought in, looking nervous but alert. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of hope. Patricia presented our case with surgical precision. Carl's surveillance footage played on a large screen, showing Rebecca coaching Jacob, then Jacob's desperate pleas to contact his family being denied. The financial records laid bare the systematic depletion of Jacob's trust fund, the medical bills from Westside Family Practice, the disconnected Singapore number, the testimony from the bank contacts. It all painted a damning picture. Rebecca's attorney tried to discredit me, bringing up her dementia claims, but my recent neurological evaluation, presented by an independent expert, shut that down quickly. Then came Jacob's testimony. He spoke clearly, calmly, about his isolation, the medications, the constant feeling of being trapped. He described how he was told I didn't want to see him, that I was too busy, too disappointed. His voice, steady and rational, resonated through the courtroom. The judge listened intently, occasionally interjecting with sharp questions for Rebecca's attorney. When it was over, there was a palpable tension in the air. The judge's decision came swiftly. He found clear and convincing evidence of guardianship abuse and financial exploitation. Rebecca's guardianship was immediately revoked. Jacob was free, and Rebecca was ordered to repay the stolen funds, with interest, and faced criminal charges. The relief that washed over me was immense, but it was overshadowed by the sight of Jacob, finally able to walk out of that courtroom a free man. We embraced right there, a hug that held 5 years of unspoken words, of fear, of hope. Rebecca was later convicted of fraud and elder abuse, serving 4 years of a 5-year sentence. The money, or what was left of it, was returned to Jacob. But you can't get back 5 years of a man's life. In the weeks and months that followed, Jacob and I worked to rebuild. He moved into a small apartment, started therapy, and slowly, cautiously, reconnected with the world. It was a long road. He had to learn to trust again, to make his own decisions, to live without the constant fear of being controlled. We visited the farmer's market together the following spring, exactly a year after that fateful package arrived. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and fresh produce. It felt like a new beginning. "I've been thinking about testifying," Jacob said as we walked between the stalls. "There's a state legislative committee looking at guardianship reform. Patricia thinks our case could help change how the system works." "That's good. Other families shouldn't go through what we did." "The thing is, I'd have to talk about everything. The isolation, the medications they gave me to keep me compliant, the way they made me believe my own family had abandoned me. I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of public scrutiny." I stopped walking and turned to face my son. At 43, he looked older than his years, but there was something in his eyes now that hadn't been there at Riverside, a sense of agency, of being in control of his own life. "Jacob, for 5 years, I made the mistake of not asking hard questions because I was afraid of the answers. Don't make decisions based on fear now." He smiled, and for a moment, I saw the boy who used to help me pick apples when Martha was still alive. "When did you get so wise?" "When I almost lost the most important thing in my life." The legislative testimony happened 3 months later. Jacob spoke for 20 minutes about the realities of guardianship abuse, about how easily the system designed to protect vulnerable adults can be manipulated to imprison them. His testimony, along with others, led to Senate Bill 847, Jacob's Law, which requires independent medical evaluations, mandatory family notification, and annual reviews for all adult guardianships. Rebecca was released after serving 4 years of her 5-year sentence. She moved to another state, found work as a legal assistant, and by all accounts was trying to rebuild her relationship with her own children. Jacob received a letter from her on the anniversary of his release, not asking for forgiveness, but acknowledging the scope of what she'd taken from him. He never responded to the letter, but he kept it. "Closure isn't about forgetting," he told me. "It's about remembering without the memory controlling your life." Today, I work part-time as a consultant for elder abuse investigations, helping families spot the financial red flags that I missed for 5 years. Jacob runs a support group for guardianship abuse survivors and speaks regularly at legal conferences about reform. We have dinner every Sunday now, a tradition we started during his recovery and continued because we both realized how much we'd missed during the years of separation. We talk about work, about current events, about Martha's memory and what she would think about the men we've become. Sometimes we talk about Rebecca, about the children she left behind, about the complexity of loving someone who betrayed you so completely. But mostly we talk about the future, the life Jacob is building for himself, the relationships he's developing, the possibility that trust, once broken, can be carefully rebuilt. The package that started this journey sits in my home office now, a reminder that the truth has a way of surfacing, even when people work hard to bury it. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in medical bills and misdirected mail, sometimes in surveillance footage and legal documents, but it always arrives, and when it does, you have a choice. Look away because the truth is inconvenient, or follow the evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads to places you never wanted to go. I spent 5 years making the wrong choice. I won't make that mistake again. Jacob's inheritance will never be fully restored. Some money is gone forever, and 5 years of life can't be returned. But justice doesn't always mean getting everything back. Sometimes it just means getting the truth, holding people accountable for their choices, and building safeguards so the same harm can't happen again. That's enough. It has to be enough, because the alternative, accepting lies to avoid confrontation, trusting without verifying, choosing comfort over truth, is how people disappear from their own lives, one small compromise at a time. I learned that lesson late, but I learned it completely, and now every Sunday over dinner, I watch my son live freely, In a world where he makes his own choices, speaks his own words, and knows that when he picks up the phone to call his father, I'll always answer. That's what victory looks like after guardianship fraud. Not the dramatic courtroom triumph of television shows, but the quiet restoration of agency, dignity, and family connection. It's enough. More than enough.